The following is an Operation Podcast production.
I was trained in conventional medicine, interventional radiology, so I did minimally invasive surgeries. Radiology, you see all of the disease processes in your body as well. And so I had a really good breadth of disease in our body. But 7 years ago, overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure on prescription medications, and I was like, here I am trained at the National Institutes of Health, UCLA, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. How am I getting disease? It was really how I was living my life. People need to know, maybe my origin story was I was a boat refugee from Vietnam. I spent 8 months on a refugee boat, 3 months in a refugee.
8 months.
Crammed with 2,000 other refugees.
And you were the only child to survive?
I was the only infant that survived. Wow. People either, died of dysentery or some people fell off the boat. And just scan your body, scan your thoughts, scan how you feel, all these different things. And just have the awareness, developing the muscle that how you're thinking, how you're feeling, the different sensations that's going on in your body is not necessarily you. And that potentially there is a program that might be activated at a certain point to know that maybe those thoughts, feelings, and emotions are not coming there and allowing it to potentially just come through your body and not to be assigning yourself to those thoughts, those feelings, those actions. That's the initial step to kind of step into consciousness.
It's the recognition that we're just a vessel of these things. We are not, in fact, only and always these things.
Correct.
Right now, do you think we, the collective we humans, are actually more stressed out, or do we just have an incorrect perception of stress right now?
I think collectively we are a little bit more stressed out, and I have a theory behind that. Now, hi, this is Dr. Kien Vuu, but you can call me Dr. V. I am a triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert, and you are listening to Ever Forward Radio.
Kien, what's going on, man? Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. This is a really cool place, and to have a conversation with you with that deep baritone voice you have, it is so soothing. So it's feeling good right now, brother.
Well, I want to kick things off right away, man. I heard you say this on another podcast, and it hit home. How you live your life is medicine. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, a little bit about my background, I was trained in conventional medicine, interventional radiology, so I did minimally invasive surgeries. Radiology, you see all of the disease processes in your body as well. And so I had a really good breadth of disease in our body. But 7 years ago, overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure on prescription medications. And I was like, here I am trained at the National Institutes of Health, UCLA, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. How am I getting disease? It was really how I was living my life. And we can dissect this a little further. But, once I got disease, I did a lot of work in longevity medicine, regenerative medicine, and I studied people in the blue zones and how they live their life. And I correlated with how they were living their life, just their choices and what they ate, how they thought, how they showed up, and saw molecular and epigenetic changes to their DNA in terms of certain behaviors. That is suggesting that how we live our life, the choices that we make, the energy that we create in our body actually speaks to every single strand of DNA in our body. Oof. So the choices that we make can be our poisons if we choose to basically make choices that are detrimental to our cellular health, or it could be our most profound medicine. And once I started to tap into that, and started to make some more conscious choices about how I approach life, about the messages I was giving to my cells and how I live my life. How we live our life is medicine.
Man, I love that answer. And it hits home so much more, I believe, because of who you are, how you were trained. To hear in MD, and we're going to get a lot more into kind of the other verticals to which you have studied and biohacking, optimization, longevity, but just to hear a Western doctor, an MD, allopathic trained physician, say that, I'm like, yeah, dude, more of that, all right?
Yeah.
One thing I want to get into is stress.
Yeah.
Right now, I think a lot of us legitimately are more stressed out for a lot of different reasons. The world is never getting to be an easier place. Yeah. Also, we have access to so much more potential and opportunity and information. And with that access comes, in my opinion, the stressors of what do I do with this? How do I apply it? what does it really mean to me? You may be stuck in comparison syndrome. But I also think some of us might be in this weird, unrealistic relationship to stress. We have a tainted perception of stress. My question for you is, right now, do you think we, the collective we humans, are actually more stressed out, or do we just have an incorrect perception of stress right now?
I think collectively we are a little bit more stressed out, and I have a theory behind that. Now, how do we used to deal with stress? We actually have programs in our body, in our system, to be able to recognize danger in our body. And back in the Paleolithic days, it was a saber-toothed tiger coming to attack us, or it would be a neighboring village that would come after us. And it actually activates the stress response. Once our body perceives stress, it basically turns on this gene sequence called the conserved transcriptional response to adversity. So basically, once we recognize stress, our body quickly allows us to be able to fend off the stress. What happens here is inflammatory genes get upregulated, because what if you got a flesh wound from a saber-toothed tiger or a spear or something like that? Inflammation has to come in, and it would drop your immunity genes. Because why expend energy on fighting against cancer or infection?
I have this acute issue I need to work on right here, right now first. Right, yeah.
Now, the people in the Paleolithic days, once the stress response was gone, just like many animals that are out there, they would flee from their predator, and then they will go back to grazing. That's where we were before. Unfortunately, our modern day lifestyle has started to spring out all these potential things for us to worry and be stressed out about.
It's just like stress landmines everywhere.
Exactly, and we never calm down. So unless we are starting to be aware, and we could talk about this a little bit later, but there's a part of our brain and nervous system called the default mode network that's constantly looking for what can hurt us. And as we're developing as children, we're almost kind of taught not to be ourselves. We need success to be loved. We need to act a certain way to receive love from mom and dad, or to be accepted, or to belong. So we have all these different stresses, and we're going out into the world as that. It becomes the seat of our ego. And I would posit to say that unless we are aware of how we're approaching life, most people are kind of asleep to these old programs that keep them stressed out pretty constantly. So I would probably say that compared to our ancestors, we are more stressed out over an extended period of time. Our stresses are supposed to come with a big surge and then dissipate. Now it's just tiny stresses throughout the day, and it activates this conserved transcriptional response to adversity. So inflammation is elevated in our body. Our immune system is down. This puts us prone to chronic symptoms and chronic disease.
I heard you say that we are incapable, or don't have the skill set strong enough now to reduce stress or get rid of stress like we used to. Is that correct? What do you mean by that? And why you would think, with all the advancements we have made in health and technology and humans in 2024 compared to 24, that we would be able to better hack stress? Why not?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more as I talk about longevity. But if we look back at who we were as civilizations, as human beings in the world, we had a deep sense of a tribe. Everybody was connecting with each other. People were moving around. We slept when it was dark. We woke up when there was light. There was all these things going around, and we behaved as
when we were hungry, didn't just graze the pantry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we lived in such a way that human beings were supposed to live. And then we had a stress response to handle danger. How are we living now? Completely devoid of how a human being should be living in terms of our ability to move, the connection we have with people, how we show up in the world with purpose. We're always thinking me, me, me. So the way we have lived has changed. And those things have continuously caused stress. We had natural abilities to be able to just go back down to feeling safety, love, and connection. That's the key thing that we had, earlier on, that we're losing. Our default mode network is constantly being turned off because we learn things as children that we are not safe, that we are not loved, and we're not connected. And we form this ego, and then now we approach the world with that. So we just have a lot more stresses, and we don't have those natural things that we used to do back in our Paleolithic days of being able to come back down to stress. And that's really just living as human beings as we should be living. moving, eating right, connecting with other people, serving the other people that are there. We don't have that anymore.
Not everybody and not as much, I believe. There is kind of this, in my observation, this kind of resurgence right now for a lot of that, which I'm all for, which leads me to a unique question I actually just thought of randomly this morning before we came over here. And a lot of people, like ourselves, we lean into a lot of technological advancements, biohacking, optimization. We run all the panels. We research all the peptides. We look into hormone therapy, supplementation, the right timing for this exercise, for this sleep, for that thing. But then I also feel like a lot of those same people are ones that talk about and promote what our ancestors did. And I feel like there's a little bit of a dichotomy there. How can we be promoting ancestral health, what our ancestors did for well-being, stress reduction, sleep, body composition, longevity even, while still also leaning so heavily into the advancements in modern technology, optimization, and biohacking?
Yeah.
Don't you kind of have to be one or the other?
Yeah, there is a great dance. I think what technology has been able to show us is the different things in our life that are proving what our ancestors did made a lot of sense. And I think many people want the science that's there. And there's a lot of great science that's out there. And don't get me wrong, I mean, the advances that we have in diagnostic testing to stem cells, regenerative medicine, the pharmacologic agents that are proving to have some really good, cool potential in extending life, all that's amazing. I put that in the bucket of the science of longevity. But if I look back and I see where people live the longest, where the people are the happiest and really being able to be really thriving into their old age, they don't have access to any of this technology.
Yeah, if you ask them, hey, what's your A1C? They're like, what?
Yeah.
Or, when's the last time you had this lab done? Or, any of these kind of markers that so many of us are after now so that we can preserve or even add longevity. They have more or less have no idea or zero or extremely limited access to.
Yeah. I think it's going back to that, but it's marrying the balance of sort of like this current chaotic lifestyle that we have. And yes, it's good to have some biomarkers, as feedback. But do you want to live as a Brian Johnson or do you want to live as, somebody in the blue zones?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. I think it's great to have some feedback. But there's also ways of doing it without all of that probably gets you pretty similar results.
Yeah, he's a pretty extreme example. Brian Johnson, for anybody that doesn't know, go check him out. He's dumping tens, hundreds of millions of dollars into himself to be, I think the line is the most rigorously studied human ever, something like that. Right. He doesn't even like dopes his son's blood or something. He cycles their plasma or something.
Yeah, I think they do plasmapheresis.
I'm probably butchering
I think he's done that with his father.
Okay.
And potentially his son. But I think it's really cool. I think people want to see the science.
Yeah.
But I think when he boils back down to the message, it's really, very basic tenets of lifestyle and nutrition that I think the people in the blue zones have. So at the end of the day, it's great that we have all that science. And certainly if something isn't working for you, if you're not feeling well, let's dig into the science. But I think ultimately it's coming back to, one, loving yourself, remembering who you are, and tapping back into that essence and soul of where you are. I've done studies and research that basically shares this. Yes, how we live our life is medicine, but the thing that makes you feel alive, the thing that brings you joy, that lights you up, the things that light you up or bring you this joy and aliveness is as unique to you as your DNA. And when you do that, and you live in life as the energy of that actually preserves your telomeres, reduces inflammatory markers, puts you in states of gratitude. So that's the amazing thing that I think I want to share with people. It's that sense of aliveness. Do you remember who you are before the programming, before the societal conditioning? Can you come back to that? Live as that. And that will produce not only years to your life, but much, much more life to those years too.
Man, amen. Amen, brother. Which leads me to, we're in great flow here. I love this. Yeah. Another question I have down is, are we too married to protocols? more specifically other people's protocols. And this is coming from a guy that has a lot of regimens in his life, a lot of disciplines, a lot of habits, a lot of rituals, however you want to carve it. And the reason I ask this question is because I think now where I personally am at in my wellness journey is I'm realizing how much those served me in the past, and now how grateful I am to have them as a fallback, as an infrastructure, so that when I do kind of get off my course, I know where, how, why, and when to fall back on certain practices. And I'm also realizing heavily they were because of somebody else. They were not as much for me, and that is why I have struggled with some more than others for adherence. Certain protocols can serve humans across the board in a collective way, I believe. But when we don't understand why we are doing them or testing them out to be fair to us, I think that's where a lot of us struggle. What's your take on certain protocols, especially, anybody can go on Instagram now or listen to Huberman Lab or, any other kind of like biohacking source and go, oh, that's the thing I need to try. But it doesn't always work for them.
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think, if you're looking at a population that is asleep to how they were living life and, sleep, nutrition, movement, their social community, their sense of purpose, all these things, if they were just off and they were just living in default survival mode, then a protocol would help just create some boundaries in place.
So going from nothing to something, kind of chaos to order.
Exactly, which is probably why you found the protocol so helpful. But I think at the end of the day, and I work with a very intelligent AI group that's called Shae.ai, SHAE.ai, where they're just looking at how our bodies are formed. Everybody requires something a little bit different. Not the same exercise, not the same amount of sleep, not when to be sleeping and things like that. That app is phenomenal for that. But getting a little bit of order initially starts to shift the way you feel. And I think for most, it's kind of tapping back into you. Who's that authentic you? And as you start doing protocols, it is just a little bit of structure for you to go, oh, what's working for me?
Right.
And as you do it more and more, you're starting to say, I can't have any structure because all of my life has been, I've learned potentially things that light me up, but I'm probably learning how not to be myself. Protocols will start to put into play some at least some system for you to go, I start feeling good when I'm doing this. And I'm starting to feel differently when I'm doing that. And you're starting to just listen to yourself and your body more. That's how the people back in the Paleolithic days lived, is they just naturally live life in flow. We used to be more in flow. And we're not in flow anymore. And I think those protocols help initially to kind of tap us back in because we were so deviated. But once we start to do more of the work, here's the other thing for me. I've lost like 5 Oura rings. I've lost like a couple Apple Watches and Whoop bands. I can't keep track of the technology.
I'm double dipping over here still. These things are locked on.
But I really feel now that I'm so in touch with my body. I know what, like back in the day, every day just used to feel crappy. And I just thought life was that way. And then I started to implement some protocols, started to track what I did. But once you kind of get into a place where you're like, oh, I know what feels good. Oh, I ate that thing. When did I eat that thing? And I'm starting not to feel good. So you start to tap back more into your intuition as to how you approach life. And I think that's where you're finding now is you know what? I know what's good for me. And I know how this protocol is helping. And I can use them to kind of guide how I live my life. That's how I think we should be adopting those protocols, not as this rigid, I got to follow this thing or else.
Not dogma across the board.
Correct. Yeah.
For me, it brings into mind this concept of integrity. I try to live my life as much as possible out of integrity. In surface level, you might think that means, telling the truth. It's more kind of characteristics or personality. But I really put integrity in the same bucket as how I choose to move my body, how I eat, how I sleep, what I drink or don't. And I think to get to a point to have integrity with your health has to come first from a place where you have developed to your body and your body to you honesty, trust, and respect. And how many times have we all been there? I know your health journey, which we're going to get into later on. How many times do we believe that we are studying all the things, doing all the things, knowing all the things, applying all the things, but yet in our gut or in our heart of hearts, it just doesn't quite sit with us. And so our bodies then are learning, hey, asshole, I don't trust you. You're not giving me what I need or want or a consistent manner. And then we're trying to, reverse the roles. But when we learn to just listen to each other and what is, we can call biofeedback, man, we can learn, we can trust, and then we can keep that flowing so that we maintain integrity with every decision we make. That for me is kind of where I'm personally at. I love my Whoop. I love my Apple Watch. I use them for shortcuts. I use them for nudges. Honestly, right now, my Whoop is just because I'm on a winning streak. I'm almost 5 years of wearing Whoop. And I just love the aspect of having that data for sake of having the data. But right now, I live out of integrity.
Yeah, and that just feels good. And I think, we'll get to this once we kind of get into my story and sort of like where I see the future of longevity medicine. But I think it's integrity to who we are. Because I believe we were brought into this world as the soul that wants to just express life and that has these unique gifts to share with other people. And then as children, and because of potentially our toxic culture, we say no to ourselves and we live life not in integrity to our authentic self. And that creates disease in our body. I recently launched, and thank you for helping promote the Thrive State Summit, where we actually go through and we talk with 50 of the world's experts in mental and emotional wellness. And that's the key theme. The
lineup was like the super band. It was like, what was that? Like back in the 70s or 80s, like, Feed the Earth or One Earth.
Well, it was the one that Freddie Mercury had at First Aid or something like that.
Earth Aid, something like that. Yeah, it was like that, but for wellness. It was great.
Yeah, and one of the common themes really is, are we living in life just in integrity of who we authentically are? And I'll just,
and do we know who that authentic self is?
Yeah. Well, here's the beautiful part is they're part of our brain and nervous system. We'll get to this later. Part of our brain and nervous system, as we're in a culture that tells us how to be, in order to stay safe and in order to get love, we adopt these behaviors that are not us. But I think the beautiful part of the human journey is just remembering that, of doing the work to remember that. And once you start to remember that and say yes to you, that's the magic. That's how you live your life as medicine. And I can't wait to share with you what my ever forward is being, but it has something to do with
we got to wait till the end for that one, everybody. That comes at the last question. What do you think right now is the most commonly overlooked tool that has the most universal benefit in regards to optimizing our health?
Oh, geez. Two things linked together basically is our ability to handle stress and to show up with intention. And then, that feeds into our sleep and that feeds into everything. In my book, I talk about basically the 7 things that people can master themselves. Outside of that, if you master these 7 things and there's no infections.
The bioenergetics, right?
Yeah. If there's no infections or no toxins in your life that screws with those energetics, if you make conscious choices in those 7 areas of life, you become your own doctor. That's sleep, nutrition, movement. Our thoughts and mindsets, our emotions, our community or the people we spend time with, and then our sense of purpose, which I'll tap into what exactly that is a little bit later. But those are the things that control the energetics of our life and also controls basically the messages that we give to our DNA in a moment-to-moment basis. Beyond that, the only thing that would screw up that ecosystem is infections and toxins from the environment. So you have so much control of the message that you give to your cells. I even forgot what question you initially asked that led me down that rabbit hole. But
what do you think is the greatest overlooked tool right now that has the most benefit for our health?
Yeah. So being able to just deal with stress and recognize that you are stressed is so important. Because if you're not, you're basically going through life off of an old program way of fear and survival. We have I should almost talk about the default mode already. Let's tap on that because I think it's so important. So neuroscientists are beginning to understand a part of our brain called the default mode network. It's a primitive part of our brain and nervous system. So as you're a human being, you develop this thing, and its key role is to keep you safe and to help you survive.
It's our baseline operating system.
It's your baseline operating system. And at a young age, it's just in download information. So it's just like downloads from the outside. Now, it's very connected to the amygdala or our fear centers and our hippocampus or our memory centers. And so the things that it's constantly looking out for is, things that could hurt us. And so anytime you face anything that like danger, it's going to remember that more than it is everything else. One of the things we fear most growing up is losing safety, love, and connection. So it's going to learn things. It's going to learn, hey, you know what? I have to behave a certain way to get love. I need to behave a certain way to belong. I need success to achieve this thing. I need to people please. And this becomes the seat of our ego. And we might start adapting behaviors that are not our authentic selves, such as people pleasing, such as perfectionism, such as seeking success, such as aggression or avoidance. It becomes the seat of our ego.
Which these are the things usually later in life when you have a moment of awakening, you're like, wait, why am I even doing these things? Like, this isn't me, or this doesn't feel congruent to who I am.
And this thing is constantly on. One really cool study is the ACEs study back in 1998, I believe, from Kaiser San Francisco that looked at adverse childhood events. This is abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect as children, drugs in the family, divorce. So they lined up all these, 10 different adverse childhood events. And the more of these events that you had as a child, the more likely you would have high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, mental illness, cancers. All these childhood traumas, you have increased incidence of physical ailments and disease going on. So the more trauma you have earlier on, and trauma were those big T's I just talked about, but it also could be not being seen for who you are, not being able to express who you are.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to the depth to which that imprint was made.
Exactly.
And so outside looking in, most people would say or agree a hard trauma like that, being beaten, being molested, being starved, would imprint very significantly. But to the same level, someone who just learns to feel the same way that I'm not safe, these people aren't safe, I'm not getting what I need to survive or thrive. It's almost like what happened to some degree doesn't matter. It's the degree to which it imprints, and it still can have the same effect.
Yes, exactly. And so here's the thing is all these programs are placed into this default mode largely before the age of 10. Unless we are conscious of this, we are basically making decisions from this unconscious autopilot survival mode of the brain.
So most likely, I'm hearing correctly, by age 10, how we will view the world and our world, ourselves, for the rest of our life, unless we change it, is set by age 10?
It's set, but it is malleable. There is no neuroplasticity. There's things that we could talk about a little bit later to be able to quiet down that default mode so we start making some new choices. But how does that default mode lead to disease? Right? So I just mentioned the ACEs study, but let's just take me as the example. How did somebody that has studied medicine and all these things create a disease? Now, people need to know, maybe my origin story was I was a boat refugee from Vietnam, escaped post-Vietnam, spent 8 months on a refugee boat, 3 months in a refugee.
8 months.
Yeah.
Don't please, everybody, soak that up. Don't skip over that part. That's unreal.
Yeah, we spent 8 months in a refugee boat crammed with 2,000 other refugees.
And you were the only child to survive?
I was the only infant that survived. Wow. People either, died of dysentery, or some people fell off the boat when they were, we had to migrate from boat to boat, at times.
Wow.
We spent another 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp. And you would think a child going through that experience would be so grateful to be alive. But, I watched TV, I looked at the people in school, and I was constantly being teased for the holes in my hand-me-down clothes, the stinky food my mom sent me to school with. I got a lot of go back to your home country, Chinky. I got all of that. And so what was programming that child? I was not enough. I was not rich enough, not tall enough, not American enough, not white enough, all these not enoughness. And so that was my default mode. That was my old programming. And throughout life, it was like, hey, how do I get more attention? How do I succeed more so that I can feel worthy of love? And so those 7 things, the bioenergetic elements, what choices was I making in each one of those categories? Well, shoot, I'm going to go through medical school. I need to get to the top places. I need to get the top residencies. And so, hey, sleeping was for the weak. I got to do what I got to do, you know? Did I have time to move and exercise? No. Did I eat good food? No. I just basically ate the trash that was in the hospital during my training.
Well, because again, you were told that the food that you were eating and bringing in wasn't acceptable. So you're like, okay, cool. Let me jump on board to the amazing, typical, standard American diet.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that did wonders.
Yeah. So the choices that I was making in each one of those 7 categories, as much as I knew, diet, exercises, I was making unconscious choices that basically created cellular dysfunction. And so that's why, even as a chief of interventional radiology in my hospital, I was overweight, I was diabetic, I was on prescription medications. And I realized that form of training and certainly the tools that I had to try to manage those symptoms weren't working for me. And so that's why if we're not conscious of this old programming, if we don't do the work of healing ourselves, even though we kind of know what we should be doing, we are making these unconscious choices that are basically producing poor cellular health, ultimately symptoms, ultimately disease. So
I want to go there more with you.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in a great little transition point. But before we really do, because I want to get into your thoughts and expertise around the world of spirituality, meaning, even religion, consciousness, and how it literally works in the body, and why I believe so heavily that this is a commonly overlooked, crucial component to maybe why we're so stressed out, we're still doing all the things, maybe why we're not losing the weight when we have the best diet, the best workout. But to kind of wrap up what the first part of the conversation was about, this aspect of longevity and leaning into advancements in technology and wellness. I think right before we hit record, we were talking about how so many of us are working on longevity. We're trying to live for tomorrow, but we're losing today.
Yeah.
We are trying so hard to make sure that we are around as long as possible. And we're playing that long game, which I agree has a place, but at what cost for the here and now?
Oh, so good. I bring it back down to this thing of the default mode network, right? It's that part of our nervous system that it just fears what's going on outside. And there's people in the biohacking and longevity space that are just trying to do so much. Let me get as much exosomes as possible or stem cells. Do all of this because I fear aging. I fear dying. But in that fear process, in that consciousness, you are having an overactive default mode network. Guess what? When that's overactive, it activates that conserved transcriptional response to adversity. Guess what? Inflammation is slowly brewing and elevating. Your immune system is actually being weakened. So the more you chase the thing, the more you try to do, it's creating that stress in your body. Whereas doing the work is really being, not the doing. If you could start to understand just how beautiful life is, if you could start to just understand that you were gifted into this world to provide something beautiful for this world to evolve into, and if you could step into that energy and not have to worry about all the doing, or actually if you take that being in what you do, then you actually start to activate the biology of performance and longevity. You are actually turning on the epigenetics of longevity and performance once you start to be.
Really doing what so many people are seeking to try and happen, but just trying to cram, a square peg in a round hole kind of thing.
Yeah. We talk about community, for example. If you were just doing community, if we were just forced, I'm like, hey, I'm going to hang out with Chase right now because I got to for my longevity, that's not going to do anything. But if we're actually here and we're smiling, we're hugging, we're actually connecting, we're deeply connecting, that's when the oxytocin in our body goes up.
Do you think it's the same thing when people have resentment towards their workout? If you go to the gym so begrudgingly or you just look at your schedule and look, I've been there. Some days I don't want to work out. I don't want to do it. I want to have myself a moment, but I know on the other side of that, I'm going to be glad that I did. But I'm still coming to that thing with stress, with cortisol, with not being in alignment to the thing that my body really needs and wants more of. Can this same thing happen with exercise?
That's going to be like an intimate dance of your intuition. I think earlier on, because you are unawake, and probably the old programming says you don't want to be doing these things.
Yeah.
You have to get yourself lit up and to do something different. Once you tap into a little bit more of your intuitive sense, you would recognize there's probably some stresses on your phones or in the workday or these other things that pile up, and potentially you don't have the juice to do it at that moment. But that takes a little bit of time. But going from somebody where you're not disciplined at all, you will notice that moving is going to make you feel better almost immediately. But I think training that intuition to know what's default programming versus who you truly are is a process, and I am continuously evolving, day to day.
What you're saying makes so much sense for me, and I'm gonna share a little bit of a personal story with you and kind of get your take on it. The part that I shared earlier about how I kind of realized where I was just having protocols for the sake of having protocols, and now how I use them just as a framework.
Yeah.
And I'm evolving, creating new ones. Happened about 2.5-ish years ago, when so much of what you're talking about kind of came to fruition, came to a head for me. And it was this culmination of diving deep into navigating mental health and going through a pretty intense string of events in terms of therapies, different healing modalities, particularly going through ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And take the therapy component out, take that spiritual component out, that emotional, spiritual surrender that I did have, and a lot of people do. Ketamine, we're now learning, has a lot of unique neuroplasticity benefits. It has a lot of unique abilities to what I'm hearing you say, kind of, I don't want to say bypass, but really create a more malleable default mode network. Because in that experience, in the dissociative state, it actually shuts that off.
Yep.
Walk us through what's going on there, because I think there's a strong component to the ketamine therapy that I went through, having that substance in my body cross the blood-brain barrier, coupled with the spiritual component and the surrender component, and understanding why I do certain things and what I want to let go of. Also, I know there's a lot here. One other thing that I think really made the whole experience is that, I had an ego death, but I also completely relinquished any fear that I thought I had consciously or subconsciously about death and dying. I want to live a long, healthy, quality life, just like the next person, I believe. And I'm doing a lot of things to hopefully help make that happen. But if today was my last day on earth, if this was the last thing that I did today, Kien, which I'll go out with a bang with you, man. If this was it, like, I'm good. I am so good. I have zero qualms about dying. And I think that also probably was the largest component to this and resetting that default mode network. Walk us through the ketamine aspect, that kind of maybe spiritual surrender aspect, and this attachment we have to death and its hold on us and actually having longevity.
Wow, so much to unpack there. You mentioned earlier, like, did we have better ways to deal with stress, back in those Paleolithic days? Well, I'll tell you right now, the person growing up from 0 to 10 wasn't given all these different things of rules of how to be. They were just accepted for who they were. They were constantly nourished in different ways. So they didn't lose themselves in the process.
That's huge. That's huge.
So when we think of default mode programming, a child going through this type of household, having generations of different type of traumas. And that was the other thing too. There was like trauma adds on each other. I mean, we can go into the studies if you want on basically epigenetic transference. So the trauma.
2 generations, right?
Up to 2 generations,
It's wild. Meaning like the trauma that your grandparents went through. I think I read a lot about this in Dr. Shauna Swan's book, Countdown. It's so unique actually to the maternal side, because we come from 2 generations of eggs above. And so so many people now, especially eating disorders, if your grandparents, especially if your maternal grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, it's like a 40 to 50% chance you're going to have a binge eating disorder, disordered eating, something significant like that. The scarcity of food, starvation, literally was imprinted 2 generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to start to understand that. And the work that we do to heal, sometimes that imprint is a direct, like, little tag on your DNA. And doing the healing process can potentially remove those tags, or it could just rewire how your DNA, use different pathways
Literally.
to actually, exactly. That's why you do the healing process. But it's an imprint on your DNA.
Yeah.
And so for people that don't understand, epigenetic transference, it's a way our body uses a trauma that's happening to our collective right now so that our future generations could survive later on. Right. So it's a pretty neat thing that gets passed down from our genes on. So they did this study on mice, and they took these male rats. Yeah, it was rats actually. And they put out the smell of cherries, and every time there was a smell of cherries around, they would shock that rat. All right. And so this rat, after several different shocks, got conditioned to the shock. And so they would just put the smell of cherries up, and then the rat would start to shiver. Like, oh my God, okay, maybe a shock is coming. Well, get this, 2 generations down.
No.
The grandchildren of that rat that never got exposed to any shock, if you put out the smell of cherries, they would start to shiver.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is how powerful the traumas of our parents get passed on. So earlier on, way back from before, where we were just seen for who we were, we didn't have all these things of how we should be, we were allowed to be ourselves. And so that programming of the default mode never really got set. We just worried about dangers of neighboring villages and saber-toothed tigers. We weren't worried about having to look a certain way, having to be a doctor or scientist or lawyer when we grew up. None of these things.
Just be you.
Yeah, just be you. And then throughout time and generations, we have basically adopted traumas. You need to be different. You need to be this. And then it got passed down, and it just got heavier along the way, which is why, growing up these days, it's very difficult for someone to just say, be you.
What about the aspect, do you have any familiarity with ketamine, the aspect of ketamine, like the actual molecule? Can you walk us through a little bit of that if you have any familiarity?
Yeah, so I mean, in
ketamine, terms of
I lead people through ketamine ceremonies in the past, and it's a very powerful molecule. It's used in the 1960s basically to help people undergo anesthesia. Yeah. And one of the great things about ketamine compared to some of the other drugs is there's no respiratory depression. And what we understand
it's one of the most safe drugs out there.
Yeah,
especially in the world of anesthesia. It's extremely, other than like pre-existing heart condition, cardiovascular disease, blah blah blah. Yeah, it's very, very safe.
So it works on the NMDA and glutamate receptors, and what it basically does is it's dissociative, and it works differently in terms of mild doses, moderate doses, and really high doses. It can get you in a K-hole. But one of the things we know that is super
all for that, all for that in a therapeutic environment.
What we do know is it quiets down the default mode network, and this is why we find psychedelics and practices that quiet down the default mode network so healing. Because what you can do is almost from like a bird's eye view, almost start to see the different type of programming that was there, all the anger, all the resentment that wasn't released.
You get the bird above the bird's eye view,
right?
In some cases,
yeah. And you start to really wash some of those programmings that lead to anger, lead to stress, lead to these triggers, and go, oh wow, I didn't realize this, but I chose something as a child to be safe, but it's led to so much pain down the road. And so the practices and the psychedelics, including ketamine, include psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, and DMT, the active molecule in that, have been shown to decrease the default mode. And once you quiet down that default mode, is really tapping back into new possibilities.
Yeah.
Now, this is very powerful, and as we're speaking of this, I have to be responsible in letting people know it's really important to do it in the proper set and setting. And the most important part of any of this psychedelic work is the integration piece. What do you do after your transformational experience?
Please say that again. It's that important.
The integration piece is key, and that's basically what you do after the experience. Now that you have been able to maybe see some of that old programming, and potentially see how you were wired, can you make some new choices? Because yes, triggers will come. How are you going to respond to that?
And that's because our brains, quite literally, correct me if I'm wrong, we are in a hyper aware of past, present, future thoughts, states, beings, but also quite literally our brains, we are in a more malleable state.
Yeah, absolutely. You're in a malleable state, which is great if you've got that integration piece and if someone's there to guide you in terms of what to do afterwards. Because here's the problem without the integration piece. So you will get triggers later on, but you can then have practices where you ground yourself and go, oh, there it is. Oh, I remember what that is.
I can be the observer, not always the participant.
Yeah, and I could choose something different. Here's the problem is if you don't have the integration piece, everything that you felt in that experience was so great. Without integration, basically, you can have that particular therapy, even if it's not drug related, like breathwork, be an escape. And if it becomes an escape, those things become addictions rather than healing tools. So that's why it's so important to have that integration piece and do it in the proper set and setting and to have the right intention of doing that work, that sacred work. Because otherwise you can use it as a place to escape.
As a crutch, absolutely.
Which is an addictive type of route.
It's not just what you hear people say and talk about, set and setting integration. There are trending keywords around this type of medicine and healing, but they absolutely matter. I cannot stress that enough. I've talked a lot about my experiences, and it all comes back to me. The most crucial component is integration. Absolutely. Which brings me to kind of the next section of the conversation is, we could say this kind of leans into spirituality.
100%.
We're getting into more practices or just curious about things other than the obvious when it comes to our wellness. Eating, moving, sleeping. It's what's going on in the head and the heart. What role does spirituality play in our general well-being?
So great. And it's sort of like, how do you find it in spirituality?
And I say spirituality different from religion.
Yeah. Certainly
which I want to get into as well, but just spirituality.
Oh, wow. We're going to go there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, spirituality, I mean, if we should start to understand like how it became this thing. Sperm, egg, energetics, two different energetics fusing together, forming this physical form. But where do these energetics come from? Where are those proteins that come from that create who we are? There is something much bigger. And all the energetics that are around the world basically come in through proteins, through cellular membranes interacting that then form who we are. We are actually connected to something so much bigger. And I think recognizing that and remembering that actually allows us to perform at our best. Because what is the physical part of our body is we've adopted a brain and a nervous system. And in the adoption of that phase, we forget one thing. And I think we forget something super important, that we are safe, that we are absolutely loved, and we're connected to everything on the planet. That's it. But we forget those things. And we show up in the world marrying some of our parents and grandparents' traumas. And then we learn that here we are blessed in this world, that we are here to do something magical, but we forget that. And we learn not to be our most authentic selves. We learn that life is not safe, that we need X, Y, and Z to feel happy, to be safe. And then we approach life in that mode. That is the survival mode. So if you're in that consciousness, of I got to hustle, I got to make, life needs to look, I need X, Y, and Z to be happy, I need X, Y, and Z to feel love or safe or connected, you're basically in this world and trapped in this matrix of fear. And that's intimately tied together with your nervous system and the rest of your body. I told you that when that default mode is active and overactive, it basically drops you in. You can't tap into flow when you're in that stress state.
Right.
And also, you turn on that CTRA response. Inflammation goes up, your immune system goes down. You're basically, sending the bodies of stress and danger throughout your body. And the choices that you're making are unconscious. It's always coming from that default mode. And so being in the matrix, being in that default mode, basically accelerates aging because you're not living as your true self.
Despite, even if we're doing all the longevity, biohacks, optimization, we could be
You'll be a better version of yourself, for sure. Yeah.
We could be missing out, truly.
Yes. Because I know some of these biohackers that are so tuned in and so proud, and proud is an emotion of the default mode, right?
Pride's an extension of ego and some components, I believe.
Exactly. So proud to have certain data looking a certain way.
Not a bad thing.
Yeah, not a bad thing at all. But I think if it's and don't get me wrong, they're probably a much better specimen than the obese person. But if they could let some of that stuff go, because that pride also activates the genes of stress when you have that. And so we're going to let some of that go and yes, kind of live in that way. Life would just be much more magical, much more flowing. And I think that's really the new frontier in performance and longevity is this consciousness piece. Can you remember who you are and live as that? Because when you could live as that, the thing that makes you feel alive, because I think there was a kind of opposite feeling, but generally the feeling of aliveness, you don't need anything to feel like good because you actually already are.
Yeah.
My daughter.
These ketones help. I'm not gonna
lie. My daughter came into this world, and there was a cord wrapped around her neck and ankle, and I didn't know she was that she would survive or not because she got sent to the ICU, and in my life I was always preaching everything's happening for you, not to you. And in that moment, I was so pissed off at the hospital. I wasn't able to go to any of the prenatal visits because of COVID. And I was so pissed off. Like, when did you know this? Why did we get to this point here? And I remember I was in the ICU. And I was like, how is this thing happening for me? Because I'm preaching everything happens for you. I was like, this is bullshit. How is this happening for me? And the minute I asked that question, I'm like, okay, I'm really believing this. Where's the gift in this moment? The nurse hands me my daughter. I hold her in my arms. She had a tube down her nose, a tube down her mouth. She had IVs in her arms and her legs. And I was just thinking, you know what? Health complication or not, brain damage or not, she's absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. There was so much love I had for her. She deserves so much love. Yeah. And that moment right there was like this huge healing that overcame me. I was like, here's its daughter that I'm willing to love, even with, if she had a health complication or brain damage, whatever, she's so worthy. How can I not love myself? Oh, wow. And in that moment, I'm like, oh man, happening for me, not to me. And then as I look at her play now, as I look at her, thank God she's doing great.
Great, yeah.
And I just see that version of her that's just natural, that wants to just do these certain things. I'm like thinking, okay, how do I not, how do I not screw this up? But that's who we naturally are. Yeah. That's who we authentically are. That every single one of us who's been gifted with this miracle that is life is love, connected, and enough. And the work that we do in our human life is just to remember that. And when we could tap into that, we're tapping into this version and energy of ourselves that is just beaming.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. That's beautiful. It's very timely. I have a personal story I'll share as well right now that I'm going through. This whole aspect of self-love. Yeah. I'm being taught a whole new lesson about it. And how self-love we can learn to have. But where I'm at is the realization of how long in my life I did not have it, or I had a version of it that I thought was enough, and it wasn't true love and respect for myself. Yeah. For the past 5 weeks, yay me, I've been having panic attacks. I've been going through just, at first what I thought were kind of old triggers for me from PTSD kind of coming back for whatever reason. And very gnarly, very scary. Have them at home, in the gym, out in restaurants. I had one driving a couple weeks ago. And I'm navigating them, doing the things, the self-practices. I'm back in therapy and doing all the things to get ahead of it. Unlike old Chase, he would have just stuffed it down. Yeah. But a theme that I'm recognizing, I think, is a lot of these emotions that are coming up in memories during the panic attack are past experiences of observing me in trying to mask and hide the trauma that I was going through at that time.
Yeah.
And what I'm really realizing, what I think is there, is I'm recognizing how much self-love I did not have for myself. The things that I would think, the things that I would say, how I chose to live my life for years was through the lens of someone who only cared about others, which I thought was a good thing. I put others first. I served my country for 6 years. I did all these things for my family through this major time of loss. And now I'm kind of being mirrored, like, Chase, how much you put you on the back burner for 15 years. Yeah. And what that really was, Chase, was you didn't give a shit about yourself. You didn't love yourself. The way that you chose to try to put yourself in harm's way and just not give a shit about your life. Yeah. I am being shown that now. And it's crazy because I believe that I have self-love now, but my body, my spirituality, my consciousness is reminding me, hey, this is great for Chase now, but what about Chase then? We need to go work on him still.
Oh, so good. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, doing the inner child work is very, very powerful stuff. And it's sort of almost like a quantum exploration of the deep parts of ourselves that need healing. And it's very possible that, you know, as young Chase, there were times where you didn't feel that safety, love, and connection, that you made the world mean a certain way and, you know, kind of like abandoned that version and allowing him to feel that again. You know, what would you, as the consciousness you have today, be able to give to him so that he feels that? I know some people doing some energetic work. I'm going to introduce you to them afterwards.
Thank you.
You know, my lady just got back from a retreat where she had so much trauma. I feel like I could speak about it now, but so much trauma with, alcoholic father, different men in her life that just showed up that didn't allow her to feel safe. And being able to do that healing is so important. She's like glowing now. And so I'm about to go on that retreat in June. Maybe you'll join me, man.
I'm all ears. I'm all ears. Thank you. Thank you. Consciousness is kind of a hot word right now. I know it's been around for a long time. Again, this might just be awareness theory on my end, but I feel like the way that it is being brought top of mind in podcasts, content, books, healing, wellness, I think in a big way, consciousness is being folded into practices that a lot of us have been having: exercise, sleep, nutrition, etc. How would you advise somebody to kind of begin in the work of consciousness so that they are contributing to their total well-being? As like a, hey, what's another like wellness hack? Let's skip all the obvious stuff. Let's go into consciousness.
Yeah, wow, let's go there. I think for many people who are not familiar with it, just sort of, micro meditations and micro body scanning, and how it could look at something like this. Every time you walk through a door, you give yourself some kind of trigger to do this. It's really just sort of pause for a second, deep breath into your nose, hold for 7, out. That's called 4-7, for a count of 8, 4-7-8 breathing. And just scan your body, scan your thoughts, scan how you feel, all these different things, and just have the awareness. Developing the muscle, how you're thinking, how you're feeling, the different sensations that's going on in your body is not necessarily you. And that potentially I am this thing. I am stressed out. I am anxious. I am depressed. And once you start to develop the muscle of doing that, I have courses on my website that basically teach people that we are these energetic beings. And, if you are stuck in the consciousness of the default mode, anxiety, stress, worry, anxious, fear will probably be the dominant emotions in your life, and the dominant thoughts in your life are going to be kind of negative. How do you start to shift the energy? And all those 7 bioenergetic elements, one, you can create pillars and habits for life to create an energy where you're vibrating, but there's also little tiny practices of breath work, of how you move, how you breathe, that actually shifts your energy in a moment. So, don't make decisions when you are in these, negative emotions. Be able to ground yourself, ask yourself, what that emotion is telling you, and then go, okay, if I want to be in a more resourceful emotion to have this conversation with my spouse, or to ask for a raise, or to get this, to get the sale, or connect with somebody, how do I want to show up? Can I put myself in the posture, in the breathing, in how I show up to shift the energy of where I'm at so that I can, show up in a different place. Being able to tap into different energetic states in our body, that's the coolest biohack.
Yeah,
that's what Thrive State's all about, is being able to manipulate these
Truly.
7 bioenergetic elements in our life to control the energy of our life and to control the messages that we're giving to ourselves.
Some people might think of religion when they hear spirituality, when they think of consciousness. We're talking to our inner self, our higher self, the higher power. In your own words, the difference between adopting a spiritual practice and a religious practice.
Yeah. I think religion has been potentially tainted by man and their desire to control people.
Strong potential for that, yeah. Kind of the track record with man.
And there are lots of rules and dogma in in religious that I find. Whereas spirituality, there's almost a knowing that there's something greater, that you're a part of something greater. My personal belief is Jesus is God, but also you are and I am, and him being able to identify that he is God, that he is part of something that is much greater, is what allowed him to transcend. And for us to be able to recognize that we are a part of that as well. And so, that's what I feel. And along the way, I believe man, the default mode network, to have the control, to have power, and all these things have maybe tainted the message of spirituality, that we are part of God itself, that we are connected to everything, that we are loved, safe, and connected. Have distilled it down so that they could start to control masses of people, and trick people into forgetting that they are divine, that they are God, and that they are love.
Because kind of imagine a world, let's just paint this hypothetical. If every human being believed that to their core, it's kind of like, what role would religion have? I personally feel like a lot, especially with the historical aspect of Christianity and the Holy Roman Empire, a lot of religion was used to control people, and it was fear pushing, because we are higher and holier than thou. We have more of a direct connection to spirit and source than you can or are allowed to. So they recognize that if everybody believed this or knew, my personal belief, Chase Shooting's belief about this, is that we all have access to the same God.
Absolutely. And that's where I think, the greatest teachers, but potentially, your Moses, your Jesus, your Muhammad, there is one truth. And, any deviation from that is potentially just our man-made type of perception of that truth. And the fact that we have to fight over the truth is so, it's so heartbreaking.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
What a heartbreaking realization that the collective we have to fight over access to and acceptance of the truth. Jeez, man, that's I'm gonna be thinking about that one for a while. I like that.
That is the part of our primitive brain and nervous system, at play. And I think, as humanity evolves, it's just that dichotomy of, can we start to see that? Can we start to see the primal versions of us versus, seeing the more divine aspects of who we truly are? And I think the more we start to evolve into that aspect of ourselves, we are automatically turning on the biology of human performance and longevity.
Oof, man. All right, one more question around religion here. I kind of wrap this section up. I also know that a part of your story was after being a refugee on this boat for months, your family was, what's the word? Sponsored by
a
Catholic church.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure, my assumption here, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Catholic Church probably had a very strong presence, dare I even say influence, on your life, your family's life, your upbringing as a child?
I would say influence, yes, not a strong influence.
Okay, but it was there and you were aware of it?
I remember going to church, maybe probably until the age of 5 or so. I think my parents were very grateful for the sponsorship.
Sure.
The sponsored family was so loving. We still keep in contact with them right now.
Wow.
We never converted to Catholicism. We were very grateful. Like, hey, thank you, and what you believe has allowed you to loan your hearts to bring us in. We were always eternally grateful, but we never converted to Catholicism.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
My question here is, do you feel any kind of duty, obligation, responsibility to religion, and in this case, Catholicism, because of that kind of, hey, we're going to come in and literally save you guys, bring you into the country. Mm-hmm. The reason I ask that is because I feel like a lot of people, myself included, speaking personally, we are raised in a religious household. Mm-hmm. We are brought up in the beliefs, the religion of whatever our parents are. For me, it was Christianity. For me, it was Southern Baptism mostly. And a lot of that was just ingrained in me. And I thought that's what I had to do and what I had to believe. And I'm not going to get into all of that, but just nature and nurture, right? Our community, the temperament, the pulse, the religion of how we're brought into this world, I think can really directly influence to our through line here of the default mode network and our core belief system. Did you feel that? Do you feel that? How do you navigate that?
I never felt, in terms of the Catholic religion, I never felt, like I was obligated, because my parents never felt like they needed to, become Catholic, down the road.
That was probably a determining factor, kind of like
it was probably that. But when we let's look at belief systems. I always, as a child, wanted to be an actor or be in entertainment, because I think there was a part of me that just sort of wanted to, perform and speak.
I see you out there on the Squid Game game show. Yeah. You're dipping the toes in. Yeah, still got that. Yeah.
Can't wait to find out. Did you mention if you're in this reality show now?
We're and it's still in casting.
Okay, still in casting.
Yeah, early on they're gonna let me know next month.
Yeah, but certainly my parents, had ideas as to what they thought was going to be a successful life for me, and so they always pushed medicine. And so part of me was, feeling obliged that I needed to, go down a certain path to make them happy. Okay. It was, as a child, I think you always want to do, make your parents happy, even though it wasn't really fully aligned with what, I wanted to do. And I think different people, sense that as well as these belief systems, and just knowing that, it's not the thing that truly makes you feel alive.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I think, this is the beautiful part of life and the rediscovery of who you are. Like, I feel, and I feel everything happens for, as it's supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. My ability to talk about performance and longevity and spirituality only came and only, possible to be able to share my story of being an infant refugee, understanding the default mode network and being able to explain it in my story, going into conventional medicine, into the higher ranks of conventional medicine, doing these awesome talks around the world about, advances of interventional radiology, but still yet have disease. Mm-hmm. And going through all the process of the different healing and struggles have allowed me to really be able to understand performance, spirituality, longevity in a completely different lens. And now as that child who wanted to speak or to act or to do all those things, now it's like, oh yeah, my desire to do that is there, but I have to learn the lessons in life so that I can actually use those, innate talents to share with the world now.
Yeah.
I needed that life. And now I'm like, okay, I get why I lived the life that I lived.
I love that.
And I'm so grateful for it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Before I get to my final question, I found a quote that I thought you would appreciate, and I think is a perfect way to kind of wrap up our whole conversation here today. It's from Albert Einstein. A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. Yeah. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Yeah. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Man, like
goosebumps, brother.
It's like I knew what we were going to be talking about or something. I feel like that is so spot on.
Yeah.
How does that sit with you?
Oh, it's one of the things I want to be able to share as we leave is I have the opportunity to speak to organizations on performance and longevity. And what we have to understand is this: there is a beautiful sort of stratification on the human body as it pertains to humanity itself. If we look at our human body, in order for us to have the human potential, perform at our best, for us to reach longevity, we're all made up of individual cells. Those individual cells work together to form tissues, work together to form organs, work together to form systems, work together to form the human body. And if that individual cell is optimized, and if this individual cell serves, like the heart cell has to be able to pump so that the lung cell can extract oxygen to deliver to the rest of the body. All this serves, they have their own unique purpose, but it's serving the entire body. For us to have human potential, longevity, performance. If one heart cell decides, you know what, screw everybody, I'm going to extract all the oxygen, I want all the nutrients, I want all this, that's a very special condition in the body called cancer. And it'll wreck the entire thing. So how are we living life? Yes, we've got this default mode network that makes us focused on ourselves, but can we see this is that we actually are individual cells in the entire body of our families, of our teams, of our organizations, and of humanity. And if you can see yourself as that, and if we want to see humanity move forward, it's not about the me, me, me. It's like, actually, I'm just one small piece of this awesome thing. Can we see that we're one small piece of this awesome thing, not just to grab and help the people immediately around us, but how do I make this entire thing better? When we can recognize that, that's when we tap into the energetic. And that's why purpose is so important. That's why purpose has been shown to add 7 to 10 years of life and longevity. That's
when we lose it, we get sick, we die off, we become frail.
Absolutely. So he makes such an important point, is that default mode, that very primitive part of ourselves that just thinks that we are isolated will accelerate aging. But once we can free that and see that we are obviously love, that we are a small piece that this whole thing operates on, damn, we are important, but we're also connected.
We're important, but also we don't mean shit. We're also so crucial to life happening, but at the same time, meaningless.
Exactly. And the more we can laugh and see that, we don't have to be so stressed out about not recognizing just the very tenets of safety, love, and connection. That's who we are. And the whole joke about this is that this primitive part of our brain and nervous system just makes us forget. But we have this beautiful life to remember.
The beauty of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
The beauty of consciousness.
Yeah.
Well, Kien, this has been amazing. It's been great getting to know you more over the last several months. I'm so glad we're able to finally sit down and deliver this conversation, this expanded conversation from so many other past conversations. And I want to bring it home to the theme of the show. Yeah. And my goal with every guest and every topic is to focus on a unique area or areas of our total well-being that, should we choose to pull some and apply it, we can move forward. We can keep living a life ever forward.
Yeah.
Those two words, what do they mean to you here today, man?
Ever forward. It just means that in every moment I get to evolve. That every moment there are parts of my old being that still show up, but I still get to choose. And every single moment I hope to be able to tap back into that state of authenticity, of love, of feeling connected, and in that mode that I describe in my book called the Thrive State. And I think every single day I consistently, choose to make new choices into that. And I want to be able to just celebrate everyone for where they are and what they get to contribute to this world. And, humanity moving forward, I think it's a beautiful place because people are starting to wake up to the beauty of life and who they are.
Never a right or wrong answer, man, but I enjoy every single one of them. Thank you. Where can my audience go to connect and learn more about what you have going on in the world? We'll, of course, have this all in the show notes, video notes, but right now, where can they go?
All the work and practices and courses that we do around consciousness of being able to activate our state, they could find at mythrivestate.com. If people want to know about the work that I do with corporations and consultancy work, they can go to my website at kienvuu.com. And you can find me all over Instagram, YouTube, doing some funny videos, some consciousness stuff at Dr. VMD.
Kien, thank you, man. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
You guys, definitely thanks so much for watching. Please, if you're listening, make sure to check this one out. I always try to route everybody to the video because it's a vibe in here, man. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I enjoy this. Sure. I enjoy it. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next episode.